When I lived in Italy, I learned the technique of making risotto. Risotto is a very flavorful, flexible dish that can be used as a side dish or an entree. You can flavor it with different stocks, different wines, and add different solids, vegetables, and meats to it as you like. The sky is the limit. It's only limited by your imagination. The aroma and taste of risotto cooking on the stove makes it a huge favorite in my house, and I know it will be in yours as well. So let's make some risotto. First thing you need to do is heat some stock or broth on the stove. This needs to be kept hot because we're going to add this in small increments to our rice mixture. And if it were cold, every time we add it to the rice mixture, we'll cool it off and then we have to bring it back up to temp. So keep it warm. It will make the cooking process faster. Put that on the back burner and we'll get our pan going for the risotto. First ingredient to go into the risotto is butter. You could also use olive oil. This particular recipe is lemon risotto and it calls for butter. So we're going to melt that butter, and to that we're going to add some finely minced shallots or onions, whichever you prefer to use. Now we want to cook these just until they get a little bit soft, so we're going to add a little bit of salt to them to make that process happen. Once your shallots or onions have begun to soften in the pan, which is a process that takes a minute or two, you're going to add your rice. We're using arborio rice, and the Italians say that it needs to go into the pan like rain, which means it needs to go in a steady stream, each grain separately, so that they all get separated and coated by the fat in the pan. And then we're going to cook this for 2 or 3 minutes. When the rice first goes into the pan, it's kind of an ivory color, and as we cook it for a couple of minutes, you'll note that there's a color change. That's the time to start adding more ingredients. So let's give this a couple of minutes and I'll show you the change in the color. When you're choosing rice for making risotto, you need to understand what kind of rice we're using. In most kitchens, you'll have long grain rice. This is the stuff that we make to serve alongside most dishes, and this does not have a lot of starch to it. You're also probably familiar with medium grain rice, which is the stuff here in the center. This is the rice that you get in a Chinese restaurant. This has a bit more starch to it, and it tends to be sticky when it's cooked, and so in a Chinese restaurant it's called sticky rice. If you look at the difference in these grains, this third one on the end is much fatter. This is arborio rice. This is the rice of choice for making risotto. It has a high starch content, and as that starch is stirred and cooked into the mixture, it makes our risotto very, very creamy. So this is the first rule of risotto: buy the correct rice. Arborio, Carnaroli, or American risotto rice is perfect for making this dish. Now if you look in our pan, you'll see the color change of the rice. It looks a lot more opaque. Some of this has actually begun to get slightly brown. And at this point, we're going to start adding some more ingredients. So to our rice, we're going to add some white wine. And because this is lemon rice, we want to flavor it with the zest of 1 whole lemon. This is what's going to make it taste intensely lemony. Now begins the stirring process. The second rule of risotto is to make sure you stir, stir, stir. Now if you notice when I stir this, as I drag the spoon across the bottom of the pan, we can't see the bottom of the pan yet. We're going to cook this and stir it until when I drag the spoon across, we can see the bottom of the pan. At that point, it's time to add more liquid. When the rice has absorbed enough of the liquid that as you drag the spoon across, you can see the bottom of the pan, it's time to add more liquid. And this is where that hot stock comes in from the back burner. 1 ladleful at a time. Don't add too much liquid too quickly. You want to keep it moist, but you don't want to drown the rice. So a little liquid, stir, 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 and keep an eye on it. Each time you see the bottom of the pan as you drag the spoon, it's time to add another ladle full of stock. We're going to continue this process for about 15 to 20 more minutes, stirring and adding stock. At that point, it will be time to taste the rice to see if it's done. I can see the bottom of the pan again. It's time to add more stock. And remember, the third rule of making risotto is not to add the liquid too quickly. We don't want to overburden the rice, but we do want to keep it moist. Our risotto is almost done. We have just a little bit more stock left. I'm going to add our last bit of stock. And if you discover that you have used all of your stock, but your rice isn't quite finished, if you need additional liquid, you could add more wine or you could add a little bit of water. How do you tell when the risotto is done? Well, it's a pretty easy test. Give it a taste and see how it is. It should be chewy, shouldn't be hard in the center. It's not quite there, but almost. As you're cooking your risotto, remember that it's important to continually stir it so that you get that wonderful creamy texture. This is a good time to review the rules of risotto. Start with the right rice, arborio, carnaroli, or American risotto rice. Remember to stir, stir, stir. Don't add the liquid too quickly. And the last rule is that when the risotto is done, it's time to serve it. It does not hold well. It's the very best texture and consistency as soon as it's finished. So in about 20 more seconds, we're going to scoop this into a bowl and serve it. Let's finish up our rice by putting in some seasonings, a bit of black pepper, and we're going to put in just a sprinkle of Parmesan cheese to get that flavor all through the rice, and then we'll top it with a bit more. And lastly, we're going to stir in some freshly minced parsley. And to give it that wonderful wake-up bright lemon flavor, just a tablespoon of lemon juice. Stir that all together, and this is ready to serve. Our risotto is done. We don't want it to wait for us. We need to be ready to eat this. So let's get it in a bowl. This is beautiful. It smells fantastic. Let's top it with just a little bit more cheese. And a little green. Lemon risotto. You're going to love this, and so is your family.